All right. I think I'm live. See how it goes, see what happens. There's a chance that people will come in, but I'm not actually expecting that. So consider this a musings. I might edit it up and upload it, but I probably won't because this was sort of off the cuff, something that just happened today. And I figured, rather than trying to explain it, because most of the debate and stuff is happening on Twitter, 140 characters, it can't really do it. And some of the things I've saw on LinkedIn and such, again, it's just not a lot of space. And I thought this is a bit more of a complicated thing, so I figured I'd just do a quick little video and put that up. And I guess if anyone has any further questions or objections, like, I'll just point them to this video. So I guess welcome. What's happened? So this morning I put up a tweet, and I'll just put it over here. Let's share it with you guys so you could see. At the share screen. All right, Brave tab. All right, so this is what I put on Twitter earlier today. And I just put reason number 217, why the plaintiffs and commission lawsuits will win. Hard to argue that buyer steering doesn't happen when this is standard industry marketing. And what happened was a reader actually sent me this, just saying, hey, with the market being what it is, I'm starting to see these again, right? What are these? These are sort of buyer broker bonus. So here's what this postcard says: $10,000 buyer broker bonus, and close in August and get an extra bonus. Now, these things were pretty common back during, like, right after the collapse, right? So I came into the residential real estate industry in like 2003, 2004 timeframe. So I was there for the bubble inflating. And then I think I was at Realogy when everything just crashed and collapsed. And, we remember that stuff. So these were pretty common. The idea was listing agents would go out and, offer all sorts of incentives to not to the buyer, but to the buyer agent, to the buyer broker, right? If you bring me a buyer, I'll pay you this. There's be a bonus. I remember in some cases there were like folks talking about like all expenses paid trips and vacations to Hawaii and stuff. This wasn't like an uncommon thing. And then when the market started recovering, I think around 2011, 2012, these started to go away, right? And obviously in the last, oh gosh, I don't know, 5-6 years, I guess, when the market just got insanely hot, these were just, not a thing. Instead, we've had multiple offers, homes being taken off the market in whatever 4 hours, off market listings, all sorts of things like that, right? Okay, so with the market changing, since the Fed's raising rates, buyer demand is disappearing, homes are sitting on the market longer, and I gather that some of the sellers are freaking out because nobody sells a house for fun. They sell a house because they need to. They have life goals or things have changed. So, these things are becoming more common. And I said, okay, well, that it is what it is. But I did think about the fact that we have these lawsuits going on, Merle versus NAR, Sitzer versus NAR. I think it's now renamed Burnett. And there are a bunch of other lawsuits, but those two are the big ones. And I just thought, like, okay, well, this is yet another piece of evidence that the plaintiffs will have when they go to argue. Now, keep in mind, these lawsuits have been going on since, 2017 or so. And I've been saying from the very beginning, this entire thing turns on this notion of buyer steering. So again, I'm sure that anyone's watching this, already kind of knows, if you've been reading my stuff, then you know that I've been sort of on this lawsuit thing for a real long time. But let's just do a quick kind of overview refresher, if you will. Essentially, the claim that these plaintiffs are making is that NAR, through its various rules, in conjunction with sort of the corporate defendants, these 4 or 5, I think it's 4 major real estate companies, have conspired, right, to keep commissions high. That's basically the claim. How did this come about? Well, the claim is that NAR has this rule that I think the lawsuits are calling the participation rule, where the listing broker, listing agent, through the MLS, would make a unilateral offer of compensation and cooperation. Of cooperation and compensation. It's that when I get paid by the seller, I will share part of that commission with you. And the specific mechanism for how this works, again, according to the plaintiffs, is that if you don't offer out enough, the full compensation, if you will. So, look, in the lawsuit, in a lot of the country, it's still 6%. So if you don't offer out 3%, then the buyer agents will not show that house to their clients or would do other things to steer their clients away from that house. Like they'll badmouth it or they'll say, you don't want to buy this one. There's some problem with it, whatever, right? All sorts of things that are, in fact, against the code of ethics. It's bad business. It's possibly illegal because it's a breach of fiduciary duty, all sorts of issues. But the claim from the plaintiffs that this happens, and therefore these rules, are designed to keep commissions high. I'm like, okay. So from the beginning, like from the very beginning when these lawsuits were filed, real estate agents and brokers have been on like all over social media arguing like they're at court. Like they're arguing in front of the judge. This doesn't happen, or whose business is it? The commission agreements with the listing broker and so on and so forth. And I'm like, look, guys, I mean, this isn't. None of us in social media are actually making arguments in front of the court, right? So we just got to look at it almost from an analytical standpoint and say, okay, well, how's this going to go? Like, who's more likely to win? Who's more likely to prevail? Okay, well, here we are in 2022. Burnett has now been certified as a class action. All of the motions dismissed have lost. The judge always have, consistently ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. And if you read through some of those like rulings, some of those opinions, not like opinion on the case, but opinions on these motions, what comes out pretty clearly is the judge is sort of like, well, it's just common sense, right? Like if someone's not offering to pay you, then you're not going to show that house, or you're not going to work with that person, or what have you. In other words, it's all about this notion of steering. It's all about this idea of buyer agents saying, you know what, I'm not going to show this house, or I'm not going to help my client with this house, or I'm going to do some whatever other things, right? And this has been the subject of like lawsuits from the Department of Justice. I'm sure the FTC is looking at it. There's all sorts of issues around this. But at the center of all of this is this notion of steering. And I wrote a long post a few years ago talking about this, saying I think whoever wins, they're going to win on the basis of steering. If NAR and these 4 corporate defendants can show that like steering, yes, it happens, but it's a very rare thing. It's against the code of ethics. It's against fiduciary duty. Good agents don't do it. Great buyer agents and buyer teams will actually go and get a exclusive buyer agency agreement signed. It's just really not a thing. There's arguments, and we'll see it in this thread, that this just doesn't happen because now in the age of Zillow, the buyers can go see what's for sale, and they're not, it's not the agent saying to the buyer, hey, listen, there's this house, you should go see it. It's more the buyer telling the agent, I just saw this house on Zillow, I want to go see it, right? So I'm like, okay, all of those are factual arguments. My point simply is, in a trial, you have a plaintiff making a bunch of claims, you have the defense making a bunch of claims, and you have to produce some evidence, right? So back in 2019, when I started like really seeing some of these things, I want to remind you, some of you remember this. There was this big story. Let's see if I could switch this over. I'm going to stop sharing on this one. Share. All right, Brave tab. Okay. Some of you probably remember this story. The Houston Chronicle ran a story in 2019 talking about how in one of the lawsuits, I'm pretty sure it was the Merle lawsuit, the Keller Williams like corporate training was introduced in evidence. Why? Because the corporate training, and this is again very common, has a script, right? It included a script allegedly trained real estate dealing with a seller who wants to reduce buyer commission to save money. And this is what Keller Williams was like teaching its agents to say. When you reduce commission, you reduce the incentive for that agent to bring a buyer to your house. If an agent has 10 different houses, 9 of which come with 3%, 1 of which comes with 2.5%, which houses do you think they're going to show? And I'm like, look, this is the industry's own training materials. Like, that's pretty powerful evidence. It's not about whether I agree or you agree or we know some of the details. It's not about that. It's about you have to be in front of a judge, in front of a jury, and like producing evidence to support your claim. This is pretty powerful evidence, right? And I noted there's some other, there are like YouTube videos going around of like real estate coaches saying, here's how you overcome a commission objection. And I'm like, okay, again, it's not, none of them say Zillow and buyers drive. No, they say this is how you overcome a commission objection. So I'm like, all right, this is pretty powerful evidence. What is NAR and the defense going to have on its side? Because they're not going to be just like give up on it. They're going to come up with something. I just don't know what that is. Is it going to be, it could be a statistical study, showing that these like steering incidents really don't happen. It could be, I don't know, surveys of thousands, millions of realtor members saying that, look, nobody steers buyers anymore. It's buyers steer the agents nowadays, right? Because Zillow. Fine, then they're going to have to come up with that. My point simply with this morning's tweet was, again, let me go back to that, was, look, this has been a long time. Let's see, where is it? Yeah. So practices like this, again, it's been a long time industry sort of marketing method, especially back in the buyer's market days. And we're seeing it again because the market has turned. Okay, well, why would a listing agent, why would a listing broker offer out this? Why would they do this as a marketing? If you bring me a buyer, $10,000 buyer broker bonus. No, it doesn't say buyer bonus. It doesn't say $10,000 paid to closing fees for the buyer. It says buyer broker bonus. And if you close in August, then get an extra bonus. Like these were, incentives being offered to the others, the buyer agent, the buyer broker. Well, why would the industry do these things if steering was not a thing, right? If no buyer agent had any influence whatsoever on the buyer's decision, why would listing agents themselves be sending stuff like this out? To me, this is pretty powerful evidence that something's happening. Does that mean, which is why I said it's reason 217. The other 216 have to do with like the pretty apparent bias on the part of judges, things like the Keller Williams manual, things like all the real estate coaches out there telling their people and for years and years, like, this is how you overcome a commission objection, right? So I guess I just wanted to make this real quick thing. And I wanted to do this live stream in case like people wanted to debate or, sort of bring up things. I'm like, fine, bring them up. But again, I'm not the judge. None of us are arguing in front of the court. All I was pointing out was this is pretty powerful evidence that the industry itself believes, again, maybe it's wrong, but believes that offering incentives to buyer agents has a positive impact on being able to sell that house faster or for more money. That's all. What can NAR, what can the corporate defendants come up with as a counter evidence? I don't know. Like I said, it's going to have to be statistical studies. It's going to have to be, expert witnesses, right? Maybe some agent with 30 years experience talking about that. This really doesn't work. It doesn't happen. Maybe they'll get, Rich Barton from Zillow come on and say, yeah, maybe before Zillow, this sort of thing happened. Now it doesn't because buyers see immediately. I do want to point out one thing. And NAR has changed its rules. A lot of MLS have changed their rules in recent years because of these lawsuits, right? And because of Department of Justice action, where it used to be that you could go into an MLS and like filter by compensation offered. That is no longer a thing in any MLS I'm aware of because Department of Justice was like, that's a problem, guys, right? There was a civil investigative demand, there's all these things. So that's no longer a thing. But that's after the lawsuit was filed, and the lawsuit's going to look backwards, right? It's any lawsuit is claiming that you damaged me in some way, my client is owed money because of things you've done in the past. So saying like, well, that doesn't happen anymore. You don't have to offer compensation anymore. You can't search by compensation. Like, yeah, that's today. That's irrelevant for a lawsuit because the lawsuit's going to be looking backwards, saying what was going on in 2010, what was going on in 2012, not what's happening in 2022. So I do want to point that out. So I just thought I'd explain it because, a lot of folks were like, I don't know, I feel like they're getting mad at me. I'm like, what are you getting mad at me for? I'm not arguing in front of the court. And why are you making legal arguments like none of us are arguing in court? This was simply pointing out that when the industry itself does marketing that clearly says, if we incentivize the buyer agent, we're going to have a positive outcome, then it's pretty easy. Like, it's just logical to say, well, then if you disincentivize the buyer agent, you're going to have a negative outcome. And that's the premise of the plaintiff's case. I mean, that's pretty much the entirety of the plaintiff's case. And I just think, we are handing the plaintiffs in those lawsuits pretty powerful evidence. That's really what I meant by it. Like I said, hopefully that explains my thinking on this, my logic on this. And again, if you disagree, then I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to know what you're disagreeing with. Again, this is not to say, that the NAR has no chance to win or anything. It's just, you got to produce evidence, and I don't know what that evidence is right now that counters something like this, right? If you could think of something, I would love to know. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.